All right, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Rochelle, and I'm the dietitian for Choices Kitsilano. It's my pleasure to introduce Alex Inman and Stephanie Dang, who are both registered dietitians with the College of Dietitians of British Columbia and co-founders of the Vancouver Dietitians. Alex has years of clinical experience working with Fraser Health, specializing in digestive health, including celiac disease, IBS, constipation, and more. She has a passion for helping people reach their health and wellness goals through evidence-based nutrition counseling, and education is a weight-inclusive practitioner. Stephanie has years of experience as a clinical dietitian at BC Children's Hospital, working primarily in gastroenterology and eating disorders. She also has extensive experience as a sports dietitian with high-performance athletes at the Richmond Olympic Oval. She has worked with teams such as Volleyball Canada, UBC Rowing, BC Rugby, BC Speed Skating, and more. Stephanie is passionate about helping people heal their relationship with food and reminds everyone that eating should be delicious, nutritious, and enjoyable. Now, before I hand it over to Alex and Stephanie, I'm going to quickly go over some housekeeping. So first, for those who have attended this presentation, you are eligible for a nutrition buck. A nutrition buck is $10 off of Choices when you spend $50 or more. A survey link will be sent out to you at the end of the seminar so you can collect your mailing address, and all nutrition bucks will be sent out approximately 1 month after this event. Second, you can visit or call your local Choices store to talk to nutrition counselors or myself, or you can email nutrition@choicesmarkets.com. And lastly, if you have any questions, please enter them in the chat box so they can be answered at the end of the seminar. Please remember that you do need to sign into your YouTube account or create one if you haven't had one in order to participate in the chat box on this video. All right, thank you. And Alex and Stephanie, it's all yours.
Great, thanks for that warm welcome. So my name is Alex, and I guess I don't need much more of an introduction after that lovely introduction. Thank you. But yeah, so I'm Alex, and I'm one half of Vancouver Dietitians, and I'll pass it over to Steph to introduce herself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Stephanie, also registered dietitian. Already did a pretty great intro, so not much more to add. But we're both excited to be here today. Next slide. So for today's agenda, we are going to cover what is gut health, why does it matter, what influences your gut health, and how to maintain your gut health and make sure you have good gut health. We are also going to do a recipe demo at the end. So we will send out the recipe afterwards, but feel free to jot down some notes, and we'll go through that using A2 milk. Next slide. All right, so what is gut health? And next slide. So gut health by definition is the physical state and physiologic function of the many parts of the gastrointestinal tract. So what that means is your digestive system is your body's way of eating, digesting, absorbing the nutrients found in food, as well as eliminating any waste products. And so it starts in your stomach, and that begins the digestion process by churning food, breaking it down, using the digestive acids. And then the small intestine does most of the work of digestion using enzymes and absorbing nutrients for the body to use. And then last, we have the large intestine, which reabsorbs water and electrolytes and helps get rid of the waste. So your large intestine actually contains the largest bacterial ecosystem in the human body, which is also known as the gut microbiome. Next slide.
Yeah, so if you've ever looked up gut health or digestive health online, you might have seen this word, gut microbiome. And basically, the gut microbiome is just a fancy way of saying all of the microorganisms, which include bacteria and fungi that live in our digestive tracts. And like Steph said, primarily in our large intestine. So a healthy gut contains healthy bacteria as well as immune cells that ward off infectious agents like bacteria and viruses and fungi. So your digestive system is actually home to trillions of bacteria, 10 times the number of the rest of your human cells. And the human gastrointestinal tract contains around 1,000 different bacterial species. the composition of everybody's microbiota, which is another way of saying gut microbiome, is completely unique. You can kind of think of it as individualized as a fingerprint and is influenced by factors like diet, where you live in the world, but there are some microbes that are common to all of us. So these bacteria help us to break down indigestible fibers and release beneficial compounds we can't make ourselves, things like vitamin K, B vitamins, and anti-inflammatory short-chain fatty acids. A healthy gut also communicates with the brain through nerves and through hormones, which help maintain overall general health and well-being. So our gut microbiota, or our gut microbiome, help play important roles in metabolism, immunity, development, and behavior. So they're pretty important.
And so if Alex hasn't convinced you already that your gut health matters and your gut microbiome is super important, there is some really good research linking gut health to a variety of different health benefits and also health consequences. So gut health has been linked to things such as chronic diseases, weight gain, protection against pathogenic bacteria, immune system function, autoimmune diseases, mental health, skin health, irritable bowel syndrome, bowel diseases, and more. There is so much that we do not know about our gut still, and we're starting to learn over kind of recent years how important our gut health and gut microbiome actually is. Slide.
So hopefully now Steph and I have convinced you that gut health is important. So your next questions might be, okay, so how do I help to improve my gut health? Now, unfortunately, there are some factors that influence our gut health, like age and genetics, which are outside of our control. But fortunately, there are quite a few lifestyle factors that affect our gut health. And those can include things like medications, physical activity or exercise, stress, sleep, smoking, alcohol consumption, and last but definitely not least, our diet.
So we'll start off with medications. I just wanted to start this off with, this is not a reason to stop taking your medications, but really rather to discuss, possible side effects with your medical team, doctor, and how best you can support your digestive health. So some drugs, that have been linked to reduced microbiome diversity include antibiotics. So I always kind of remind people, antibiotics are killing the bad bacteria, but they can also easily kill the good bacteria as well. Proton pump inhibitors, metformin, anti-cancer drugs. And so these medications are designed to act on human cells, but they can interfere with bacteria by hindering their growth and contributing to a lack of microbial diversity. And this might promote gut disorders and chronic inflammation. So like I said, no need to stop taking your medications, but definitely an opportunity to have an open conversation with your healthcare provider. Next slide.
Yeah, so another really important factor in our gut health is physical activity or exercise. So actually, research is showing now that exercise is linked to increases in the number of beneficial microbial species, so the good bacteria in our gut that we want more of, as well as enriching microbial diversity, which just means having a variety of different species of bacteria in our gut. Enhanced short chain fatty acid synthesis. So remember, those short chain fatty acids are powerful anti-inflammatories that we can't make ourselves, but are made by the bacteria in our gut, as well as carbohydrate metabolism. So breaking down, digesting, and absorbing carbohydrates. So current Canadian physical activity guidelines recommend adults accumulate 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per week. And that can be broken down however kind of fits your schedule. So it could be like 5 days a week, you might do 30 minutes of activity or exercise, and that would accumulate to the 150 minutes per week. And when we're talking about moderate to vigorous physical activity per week, you can kind of gauge that by you're feeling a little bit warm, you're breathing a little bit harder, maybe you're starting to break a sweat. You might be able to carry on a conversation with a friend, but you certainly wouldn't be able to sing a song. Those are ways of gauging the type of physical activity that you're doing. Now, the benefits don't stop there. Replacing sedentary behavior like sitting or watching TV or being in front of a computer with additional physical activity or exercise, and trading light physical activity for more moderate to vigorous physical activity, if you're still preserving sufficient quality sleep, can actually provide greater health benefits. So the 150 minutes is not a maximum, it would actually be a minimum that we're aiming for.
All right, and next we have stress. So fun tip, did you know that there are more nerve cells in your gut than in your spinal cord? Very interesting. And so what this means though is that chronic stress really can contribute to persistent inflammation in the body, the release of stress-related hormones, which can actually change the intestinal surface, relocation of bacteria, viruses, and others from where they should be, and really negative impacts on gut health. So to kind of conceptualize this, I want you to think of a period of time where maybe you were particularly stressed at work, or a global pandemic where your stress levels really increased and perhaps your gut health really started to change. So whether it was the change in frequency or consistency of your bowel movements, maybe some extra bloating, gas, even reflux as well. So stress plays a really, really big role on our gut health and kind of how we're feeling. And so I think it's a really, really important thing to tune into. It's not only our diet, although in stressful situations, I'm sure, dietary patterns also change as well. And our bodies love consistency when it comes to things like sleep and exercise, and also in terms of eating. And so when our eating patterns are really changed due to stress, that's another kind of indirect factor that can impact our gut health. And so the brain-gut connection is super, super powerful, and really anything you can do to help with reducing stress in your life can really be helpful. So definitely, registered counselor if you need some more strategies to help manage your stress, but even just writing down little things really around self-care that you can do week to week or even day to day. It doesn't need to be a long time, because I think all of us have been through a huge stressful time in the last, year and a half, and finding ways to kind of reduce that a little bit, you might actually find some positive benefits with your gut health as well. Next slide.
So related to stress, sleep. So sleep can have effects on your gut health as well. And actually poor sleep patterns and disruptions to your natural circadian rhythm may actually result in what's called microbial dysbiosis. So a change in the balance of good versus bad bacteria in your gut. And so the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology recommends adults aim for between 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep on a regular basis with consistent bed and wake up times. So anything that you can do to not just make sure that you're getting sufficient quantity of sleep, so the 7 to 9 hours, but also a sufficient quality of sleep. So making sure that you are getting like you're not waking up frequently and going to the bathroom, or having really restless sleep as well. So one way that you can do that is by having consistent bed and wake up times. So making sure that you are going to bed at about the same time every day, both weekdays and weekends, and waking up at about the same time as well. Because like Steph was saying, our bodies really, really love routine. And part of that routine can be with sleep schedule as well.
All right, so we have alcohol and smoking, and don't worry, we're not going to take away your nightly glass of wine by any means, but we will say that many, many studies have looked at the chronic consumption of alcohol and the impact that it has on the gut. And those who overconsume alcohol on a regular basis do have higher rates of alcohol-induced oxidative stress and intestinal dysbiosis. And this dysbiosis leads to gastrointestinal tract inflammation and hyperpermeability, so that relocation of the bacteria and viruses that we were discussing earlier. Smoking also does have harmful effects on all parts of the digestive system, contributing to things such as heartburn, peptic ulcers, and it actually has been linked to increasing the risk of Crohn's disease, which is a type of autoimmune condition, and possibly gallstones as well. So smoking seems to affect the liver too by changing the way it handles drugs and alcohol. But the good news, it's never too late. Quitting smoking can help the gut heal and reduce risk of further damage. So like I said, we don't want to be the alcohol and smoking police by any means, but maybe your diet has been really good lately, your stress levels have been really good lately, and the only thing left that's really causing you those gut symptoms are alcohol and smoking. And if your gut symptoms are becoming a little bit intolerable, it could be a good area to kind of revisit and look at, everything in moderation. That's really kind of what we're aiming for. Next slide. All right, so now for the fun stuff, we're going to start to talk about food and diet and the influence of diet. So next slide. And the influence of diet, so diet arguably has the biggest impact on your digestive health and specifically your gut microbiome. So definitely all of the things that we were just discussing play a really important role as well, but diet is really, really huge. So we are going to focus today on variety and what that means in your diet and what kind of variety helps foster a good gut health and gut microbiome. Hydration, again, what that means, fiber, prebiotics, fermented foods, probiotics, and also the consistency, which is kind of a theme that continues to come up today, where your body, loves consistency, loves routine, and you can notice really, really good benefits in terms of your gut health as well. All right, next slide.
Yeah, so the first thing, like Steph said, that we really want to focus on is variety. So I always tell clients, your bacteria are very, very picky eaters. Different bacteria like to eat different foods, and we want to make sure that we keep them all well fed so that they don't go extinct. And actually, another fun fact is that if certain bacteria species are not well fed or they don't get the food that they like, they actually will start to eat your intestinal wall. And so that can contribute to inflammation as well. So we definitely want to make sure that all of the bacteria in our gut are getting the foods that they like and in sufficient amounts. And another fun fact is that research has actually found that those individuals who eat 30 different plant-based foods a week actually have the greatest microbial diversity, so the number of species that they have in their gut, which is a potential marker for, or a potential sign for, a healthy gut microbiome. So when we're talking about diet, the first thing that we want to talk about is carbohydrates, because they serve as the main energy source for your microbes, for your gut bacteria. But it is essential to recognize that not all carbohydrates are created equal. So while many carbohydrate-rich foods like sprouted whole grains and fruit, vegetables, dairy, and fermented foods are very beneficial to your gut bacteria, highly processed and refined carbohydrates are not. So specifically, your gut bacteria takes organic acids from healthy carbs like fruits and veg and breaks them down into fuel that can then be used for fermentation by these gut bacteria. Among all the different types of carbohydrates that you consume, fiber is the most readily fermented in the colon and has been shown to be one of the best ways to maintain and support a healthy gut microbiome. But it's not all about carbohydrates. A balanced diet is critical for both overall wellness and gut health. So again, variety. We also want to focus on things like dietary protein, which is an essential source of nutrients for microbial growth in the colon and is also a necessary factor in bacteria's ability to absorb and use ingested carbohydrates. So you might want to consider including more plant-based proteins in your diet, such as beans, peas, lentils, soy products like tofu and tempeh, nuts, and seeds.
Next, we have hydration, and staying hydrated is actually a really, really simple way to promote a healthy gut. So water has been shown to have a beneficial effect on the mucosal lining of your intestines, as well as on the balance of good bacteria in the gut. So, people always ask, well, how do I know if I'm well hydrated? Is it 2 liters? Is it, 1.5 liters? How much should I be aiming for? And the easiest and the cheapest way to figure out if you're hydrated is to look at your pee. So if your pee is like relatively clear, light, you're probably doing a good job. If it's really dark and doesn't look super clear and light, you could probably do with a little bit more water. Now, that's not a foolproof method. The color of your pee can be influenced by things like medications and supplements as well, but it's kind of, a good starting point. And so in terms of hydration, it's really like kind of per person. It depends on a lot of different things. So gender plays a role, physical activity is a really, really big part as well. And I would also look at, some signs and symptoms. So for example, dry skin, dry lips, that's kind of, a sign that you might be a little bit dehydrated. Also in terms of constipation. So something like fiber, which Alex was just, briefly mentioning, even increasing a lot of your fiber intake, if it doesn't come along with hydration, your intestines don't have enough of that, lubing effect on your bowel movements. So making sure that you're adequately hydrated along with the fiber is a really, really important thing to remember, because if you just really increase your fiber intake, you might actually find that you're a little bit more constipated. So looking at your fluid intake as well. Next slide. So to continue on the fiber talk, as Alex was mentioning, so fiber is the most readily fermented in the colon and has shown to be one of the best ways to maintain and support a healthy gut microbiome. And so the average North American is actually only getting 14 grams of fiber per day. And the current health recommendations suggest 25 to 38 grams of fiber per day. And I would say that's honestly, a minimum. So as long as you're not suffering from anything like severe constipation or any other gut condition that is contraindicated for having increased fiber intake, I would say that's kind of the minimum to aim for. So we don't really have a number yet in terms of, what do we actually need to support the healthiest microbiota possible, but we are estimating that our ancestors ate over 150 grams of fiber per day, which is, a lot different from what we're doing now. And so we'll talk about a couple of foods on the next slide on what fiber intake would look like. Slide. So we chose 45 grams of fiber just because it was, slightly more than the current health recommendations, but you definitely don't have to stop here. So this is what 45 grams would look like. So for example, for breakfast, so 2 slices of whole grain bread with natural peanut butter, banana, and hemp hearts. So the whole grain bread, I do want to mention, is actually different from whole wheat. So if you're looking at upping your fiber intake just a little bit more, looking for that actual whole grain recommendation or statement on the breads package. Natural peanut butter, so make sure it has the entire peanut in there, including some of the fiber that's in peanuts. Banana, really, really good source of fiber, and also hemp hearts, another great source of fiber. Lunch, we've got whole wheat pasta, and we're going to put that into a pasta salad with chickpeas, bell peppers, cucumber, olives. You can definitely add more things in here. A little tip that I like to do is hemp hearts and ground flax seeds. If you want to just keep these on hand and kind of sprinkle them into anything that you can, so whether it's your pasta salad or your pasta sauce or your oatmeal or your smoothies or your salad dressing, like you can really put it anywhere. And you don't really notice that it's there either. So hemp hearts and flax seeds are very mild tasting, but a great source of fiber. And then dinner, we've got a roasted sweet potato, half of a zucchini, and some chicken. So sweet potato is a really, really great source of fiber and prebiotics. Same with the zucchini, chicken breast, so protein foods, you're not getting any carbohydrates or fiber in those, but still important to have. And then for snacks, really focusing on the fiber-rich snacks, so things like carrots and hummus or any other vegetable and hummus, fruit and some almonds in there, chocolate almonds to make it a bit more fun. Yogurt with chia seeds. So chia seeds, hemp hearts, and ground flax seeds are kind of that trio. If you can kind of just keep them on hand in your kitchen, I find that it's a really good way to kind of add some extra fiber here and there. And they're usually fairly kid friendly too. Like they don't really notice that they're in there. And so if you're looking to increase the fiber intake with your kids, another great way to do that as well. Next slide. So prebiotics, what's important to know is that all fiber isn't necessarily prebiotics, but all prebiotics are considered fiber, if that makes sense. For simplicity, I think just kind of, considering fiber, just remember fiber is really good for you. If you can't remember the specific prebiotic foods, that's okay, but just knowing that they technically are different. So not all fiber is actually going to be classified as a prebiotic. But prebiotics are beneficial compounds that act as food for bacteria and can improve our health. And so these are, like what Alex was saying, these are the great food products that our bacteria love to feed on. And so some food sources include things like bananas, apples, berries, onions, garlic, leeks, asparagus, legumes, so things like beans, chickpeas, and barley. You might notice that some of these foods can be pretty, gas producing. So things like legumes and maybe onion and garlic. And you can kind of think of that as your bacteria doing its job, right? And sometimes it gets a little out of hand and causes some unwanted symptoms. But that's kind of what we want to have happen, that fermentation process. And so these probiotics are the actual undigestible parts of food that reach the colon without being absorbed. So for example, something called resistant starch, and then these are the undigested particles that act as fuel for the bacteria in your colon. Next slide.
Yeah, so now I'd like to talk a little bit about, Steph's talked about prebiotics, which you can basically think of as being food for your gut bacteria. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about fermented foods and probiotics, because these are very trendy topics right now that maybe also cause a little bit of confusion. So first thing is about the fermented foods. So fermented foods are foods that use microbes like bacteria or maybe yeast for fermentation of food components. So not all fermented foods actually contain live microbes. So think things like sourdough, wine, beer. These are fermented foods, but they don't actually contain any live microorganisms. So not all fermented foods actually contain a strain of live microorganisms that is supported to have a particular therapeutic benefit. And not all fermented foods contain the right dose of microbes to be considered probiotic containing foods. So this is the way that fermented foods differ from probiotics. However, fermented foods are still really healthy for us and have good benefits for us. For example, they can enhance the variety in our diet, which we already talked about why that's important. They can provide us with vitamins, minerals, fiber, and other phytochemicals that are important for our overall health. And they're also associated with reduced risk of certain chronic diseases and can promote our overall gut health. Now, on the other hand, probiotics are sufficiently characterized with proper strain, have been proven safe for an intended use, and have been supported by at least one positive human clinical trial. So probiotics are alive in sufficient numbers in the product at a dose which has been proven to have some sort of therapeutic benefit for a certain shelf life. So probiotics, you don't need to be taking probiotics just because you think that you should. I would only recommend them for a certain proven therapeutic benefit. So I would always recommend that you talk with your healthcare provider, like a dietitian, like your doctor, for example, about if you should be taking probiotics, and if you should, which ones and for how long. And then I'd also like to talk about the importance of consistency. So one meal or one day is not going to impact your gut health. It's about what you're doing on a regular, consistent basis. So it does appear that while diet can change rapidly the composition of your gut microbiome, it's actually long-term changes that count in terms of maintaining health immune function, intestinal barrier, managing inflammation, and more. And short-term interventions don't appear to have as big of an impact as we would like. So long-term habits looking at populations appear to be associated with reduced disease risk. So things that you want to think about, do you consistently eat enough fiber and variety on a regular basis? So not what you're doing per meal or even per day or potentially even per week, but what are you doing week by week, month by month, year by year? So another thing that we'd like to talk about is milk, because a lot of clients that have digestive issues, one of the first things that I find that they cut out are dairy products, because a lot of people find that dairy products can be a trigger for their digestive issues. However, we do know that milk is the nutrient-rich source of things like protein and fat and calcium and 18 other essential nutrients like phosphorus, vitamin A, and vitamin D. And the other thing that we know is actually the fermentation of undigested lactose actually helps to increase the concentration in the gut of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, which are two beneficial types of gut bacteria. And so as such, lactose may actually also have prebiotic properties. So remember, prebiotic means food for your gut bacteria. And given that milk products have important health benefits, including a potential beneficial impact on the gut, they actually can be included as part of a healthy, balanced diet.
So that leads us to introducing A2 milk. Next slide. So what is A2 milk? A2 milk, I should start off by saying it carries all of the nutritional qualities of regular fresh milk with one important difference. So most cow's milk on grocery store shelves in Canada contain a mix of both of A1 and A2 protein types. And A2 milk comes from cows that naturally produce milk with only the A2 beta casein protein, or doesn't contain the A1 beta casein protein type, in other words. Next slide. So why does this matter? And as Alex was just mentioning, many Canadians assume they are lactose intolerant if they have discomfort after drinking milk, even without being tested to get a confirmed diagnosis. And so I should just mention quickly here that if you have had a positive lactose intolerance test done through, your doctor, this doesn't apply to you, but this applies to the many Canadians who have assumed that they're lactose intolerant based on their symptoms. So as a result of this, the term lactose intolerance has really become this blanket term used for symptoms that could be caused by a number of different factors, including an A1 protein intolerance. And so because symptoms often disappear when milk products are eliminated, many people will decide to cut dairy from their diets and many of the valuable nutrients that are found in there as well. And so we have kind of, people who try A2 milk and say that they feel better, we attribute this to something called A1 sensitivity, which is not a formal diagnosis, but essentially, it's not necessarily the lactose which is causing these gastrointestinal issues, but this A2 milk is much easier on digestion, helps avoid the discomfort that sometimes people feel while drinking milk. So for example, things like bloating and diarrhea, or even constipation as well. Next slide. So as you can see, A2 milk and regular store-bought cow's milk do have comparable nutritional values. The only thing that sticks out here is really the vitamin D content. And I just wanted to clarify that the labels have recently been changed. So just kind of a side note in terms of vitamin D consumption, it is pretty difficult to get enough vitamin D through food. So on the left-hand side, you can see 1 cup of milk has 45% of the daily value. I just wanted to point out that this daily value used to be much, much lower, which is why the A2 milk on the right-hand side says 13% of our daily value. So it's actually the same amount of vitamin D, but the updated daily value, Health Canada has recognized that the vitamin D daily allowance should be increased. And so they've now updated all of the nutrition facts tables to reflect the same. So that's kind of the only main difference that I wanted to point out there. So similar nutrition values, the main things that kind of we wanted to point out is really the protein content. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in the recipe, but you know, a lot of the, let's say, lactose-free milks that are plant-based, so things like almond milk and, you know, maybe hemp milk, rice milk, you know, macadamia milk, there's lots of different ones out there. They don't all necessarily have the protein content and also the fat content that milk has and the A2 milk has as well. So, you know, almond milk and rice milk have almost 0 grams of protein per cup, whereas, you know, conventional milk is going to have about 9 grams per cup. So the most nutritionally equivalent would be soy milk, but even that is slightly less in terms of the fat and protein content. So the protein content, the fat content, and also with the calcium and vitamin D, which are really, really important for bone health. So these are kind of the main nutrients that we would focus on for A2 milk. So I'm actually going to shut off my video and mute myself for a second. I'm going to start setting up in the kitchen for the recipe demo that we're going to do soon. So I'm going to hand over to Alex. I'm going to disappear for a little bit and I will come back when it's recipe time.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more about A2 milk while Steph goes into her kitchen and gets ready to share her smoothie recipe with you guys. So all about A2 milk. So A2 milk is actually produced in Canada and is sourced from Canadian dairy farmers. So this is a completely Canadian product. It actually has the same great taste as regular milk, in quotations, because it is regular milk. A2 milk is something that is produced from cows. It's not something that's made in a lab or processed or anything like that. It's completely regular milk. So it has the same great taste. And actually all of the family farms that produce A2 milk are also independently certified to ensure that they meet strict animal welfare guidelines as well. So kind of what Steph was already talking about in terms of lactose intolerance, it is important to note that A2 milk still contains the same lactose as other milks. So this is not a product for those who have a diagnosed lactose intolerance, but is a great option for everybody else, kids included. And as a side note, if you do have diagnosed lactose intolerance, you might find that you're able to still consume lactose-containing products like milk if you take lactase enzymes. So you can either take them as like a supplement form or like a pill form, or you can actually, a more cost-effective option can be buying lactase enzyme drops. And these drops you add directly to milk, leave it in your fridge, and those enzymes actually go through the milk and digest all of that lactose and break down that lactose, and then you've made your own lactose-free milk at home. So A2 milk is currently available in 1% partly skim, 2% partly skimmed, and 3.25% homogenized milk. So there's 3 different A2 milks available currently. So you might be asking yourself, how are cows A1 protein free? So you can kind of think of it similar to having brown eyes or blue. A1 and A2 proteins in milk are actually determined genetically. So A2 milk tests cows and selects only those that are naturally producing only the A2 protein type and none of the A1 protein type for A2 milk. So again, this is something that the cows are naturally producing, only the A2 protein type, and that's what's being used for the A2 milk. And so hopefully Steph is already ready to do the recipe time. If you're going to be making the smoothie along with us today, I've just thrown up the ingredients on the screen here. There she is. Hi, Steph.
Hi. So this is going to be tricky.
Are you ready?
Try and present. I'm ready. I'm going to try and present. Okay. My face might get cut off, but that's not important as long as you guys can see the smoothie part. All right. So we're making a smoothie. I'll lean down for this part. So we're making a smoothie with a lot of the nutritional properties that Alex and I have discussed during this presentation. So we've got our A2 milk here. Oh, it's actually still in the fridge. Okay, we've got our A2 milk. This is what it looks like for those of you who haven't seen this already. We've got our banana, we've got some dates, avocado, cashew butter. I've got some baby spinach here and parsley leaves, which sounds a little bit strange, but you'll have to trust me on this. It actually tastes really, really good. We've got the ground flax seeds and also some cinnamon. And so this recipe, it's going to have the protein from the A2 milk. It'll have lots of prebiotics from, the banana, lots of fiber from the dates, avocado, ground flax seeds, which I was talking about earlier. It'll have some healthy fats from the cashew butter, which is really helpful in terms of making a bit of a more filling smoothie. I just saw a quick note on where you can buy A2 milk. So Save On Foods definitely has it. We'll provide a full list of retailers at the end as well. And then the cinnamon actually has some anti-inflammatory benefits too. So cinnamon, just kind of adding that everywhere. So let's get started. I know there's a recipe here. To be honest, you can't really mess up this recipe. It's going to taste really good regardless. So let's get started. So I've got my Vitamix here. Okay, so I have the homogenized A2 milk here. It does actually come in skim and 2% as well. So I'm going to start with this. I'll pour in roughly about a cup there. And we've got our banana. I like to, keep some really ripe bananas on hand, but I didn't have any. And I like to freeze them sometimes too, so that I can easily throw them into smoothies. The dates. So the dates are a way that I like to add some extra sweetness. And of course you can do that with, honey or maple syrup as well. But I find that the dates and the parsley for some reason go really well together. So I've put in 3 dates in here. I hope everybody is writing down a shopping list so that they can make this for breakfast, maybe tomorrow or the next morning. The avocado, this is the one thing I'm missing. It wasn't ripe enough. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to skip that. You guys all know that avocado, you have about a 1-hour window to use it. So unfortunately, I didn't find a good one today, but I'll put in the handful of baby spinach. I find spinach very mild, so I like to, pack in as much as possible. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I like to throw in a bunch in there.
So Steph, we actually just had a question. Would you please expand Steph's screen so that we can see her demo? And that's fair. So I'm going to try and stop sharing my screen and make you bigger and see if that makes it bigger.
Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, is somebody, let me see.
Hopefully that's made it bigger for everybody to see what you're doing.
Everyone. I think I just spotlighted it. Did that help?
I can see you just fine.
Perfect. Okay, where were we? We're at the cashew butter. So yeah, I find with smoothies, the 2 things that are often missing are those healthy fats. So in something like a nut butter, and also complex carbs. So I'm not actually adding any to this smoothie, but if you wanted to make it, extra filling, I would add in, about a big scoop of dry oats. Again, this might sound a little bit weird, but you'll find that it's a lot more filling compared to, let's say just doing some fruit and some milk. Okay, so we're at our cashew butter. I've lost the recipe, so I'm gonna have to go off of this by memory. We've got our flax seeds here. So the reason why I said ground flax seeds is the whole flax seeds, because they're so tightly bound in this awesome fiber, you don't actually digest a lot of the nutrients inside of them. So having them ground actually makes things like the omega-3 fatty acids and protein more accessible and more bioavailable for your body to digest, which is kind of a helpful tip. So whether you buy ground flax seeds or you have whole ones and you just want to kind of put them through the blender like I am, this is the amount of parsley that I'm going to take. I'm just going to quickly run this under the sink and throw this in there as well. And then I think last but not least is the cinnamon. Alex, am I missing anything?
I don't think so. No, you've
Think
got
that
everything
was
in there.
it.
I'm pretty sure you put the avocado in, right?
Unfortunately, not the avocado because that,
Oh, right. Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
But
Bringing it
I
up again.
highly recommend the avocado for the dietary fibers and also those healthy fats that are in there too. So I wonder if I should mute myself for a second, or everybody just beware because the Vitamixes are very loud. Okay. So here we go. We have your fresh green smoothie. Don't worry, I will take a sip so that I can show you guys that it does taste good. So when people kind of ask about anti-inflammatory eating as well, because Alex and I were talking so much about inflammation, especially in the gut, so how to eat more of an anti-inflammatory diet, we kind of say, you know, vibrantly colored fruits and vegetables and foods are generally going to be pretty high in antioxidants, which do help fight inflammation. So this would be a great example of that. I'll take a sip. Really good, even without the avocado, but I do highly recommend the avocado as well. Yeah, you guys will have to give it a try and let us know how you like it.
Yeah, and I think you got most of those ingredients at Choices, right, Steph?
Yeah, I did. Yes, I did get all of these ingredients at Choices.
Including the A2 milk. So going back to that question about where you can buy A2 milk, Save on Foods, but also Choices. And I've seen it at some other major grocery stores as well. And it's in the same aisle as other milks. So you don't need to go to a special place in the grocery store to look for it. Just go to wherever you find your other milks, and it should be there as well.
All right, so I'll go back to normal view and maybe Alex can share our final slide so people know where to find us, and we'll start asking some questions or answering some questions.
Okay, can you see it again?
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so maybe we should scroll back because I think there's been a few questions that have come in since we've been chatting. And if you do have any questions, please do send them our way. We love questions and we want to make sure that this is as useful as possible for everybody listening today, as well as those who are going to be watching the recording as well. So I'm scrolling all the way back. So the first comment was from Giorgio. So what if we have severe constipation? If you have severe constipation, that definitely, I think, is worth a discussion with your primary care provider, with your dietitian about why that's happening and what sorts of things you can try to help alleviate that. It could be increasing fiber and fluid, or it could be something totally not related to diet, and you need to discuss that with your primary care provider as well. I just want to touch on, though, because I find that a lot of clients feel like they're constipated because they've missed a day. And so I just wanted to touch quickly about what normal is when it comes to bowel movements. So normal could be anywhere from going 3 times a day to 3 times a week. So normal bowel movements are less about how often you're going and more about the consistency of your stool and how easy it is to pass. So bowel movements, your stool should be soft but formed and very easy to pass. They should require minimal pushing or straining and should be passed quite quickly. So signs of constipation would be less than 3 bowel movements a week, and very hard, difficult to pass stool, often requiring pushing and straining, and spending considerable amounts of time on the toilet. So just because you've missed a day, that doesn't mean you're constipated. That could be totally normal. It's more about the experience or the consistency of your bowel movement.
Hope that answered the question. That was a really awesome answer. So the next question we have, I see here, what are plant-based sources that have the same benefit as milk for the gut health? Is plant-based milk the same? So this is a good question. I think you're probably wondering about the lactase, because that's what Alex was talking about in terms of being that prebiotic. So there's many plant-based sources that have gut health benefits. I'm hesitant to say that they are exactly the same as milk, because each food is so different and has different ways that it impacts our gut health. But I will say that there are a ton of plant-based foods. So I'll name a few. Tempeh, for example, which is fermented soybeans. So this is a fermented food product, and we know that fermented foods have really good benefits on gut health. There are a couple versions of plant-based kefir, which is fermented milk. So again, a fermented product. So for example, coconut milk kefir is an example of a fermented food product. And honestly, all plants that we eat are going to have a ton of fiber. Some of them will have prebiotic properties that will have that same, or a similar at least, prebiotic property as the lactase in the milk. So pretty much any plant thing. So I don't know, celery, carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, nuts and seeds and legumes. So all of these kind of plant-based foods are really, really great for our gut health.
Yeah, so another question that came through was, can you give examples of probiotics as they relate to a therapeutic benefit? So that's a really great question. And again, I'm going to give you a little bit of a vague answer, but I'm going to explain why. So again, this would be something that I would encourage you to discuss with your healthcare provider, so with your doctor or your pharmacist or your dietitian, about kind of what's going on with you, maybe if you're having any digestive concerns, and if there are any probiotics that you might want to try. So if you have like irritable bowel syndrome, as an example, there's a certain list of probiotics that have good clinical research behind them for helping with IBS symptoms. And the reason why I say this is because, unfortunately, with probiotics, brands do matter because they can patent the strain. So if they find that, a certain strain or a certain type or a certain amount of probiotic has a certain effect, they can actually patent that strain. And that's why brands do matter. And that's why they do end up being a little bit on the pricier side. So if you are thinking about probiotics, if there's a reason why, and maybe you're wondering about them, I would really direct that question towards your healthcare provider, and they can provide you with the best answer for you.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then the next one here. Oh, my mouse just stopped working. All right, here we go. So I see a question here. What about enzymes? How do they interact with prebiotics and probiotics? So good question. I mean, enzymes and probiotics are not the same. So specifically digestive enzymes. So these would be things that help in the breakdown of foods that we eat. So in terms of prebiotics and probiotics, I don't know exactly, that metabolic process, and Alex, feel free to jump in here whenever you can, but prebiotics and probiotics have very different roles in gut health when compared to the digestive enzymes, which is really involved in the breakdown of the foods that we're eating.
Yeah, I think that's great stuff. And the only thing that I would add, and I feel like a bit of a broken record saying this, is that again, the types and the amounts of digestive enzymes do matter. So I wouldn't expect to go to a store, pull off a product off the shelf and feel better. This would be something where I would talk to your healthcare provider about what sorts and types of digestive enzymes would work for you. And again, the average person does not need to be taking digestive enzymes. If you're feeling good and you're feeling fine, you do not need to take these. This could be just an option for you if you are having digestive issues.
Mm-hmm. And there are lots of questions around the A1 sensitivity. So what is A1 sensitivity? What are the symptoms? Is there a lab test? So in terms of the lab test, no, there is no formal diagnosis, but honestly, with a lot of gut conditions, it's really based on trial and error. So it's really based on symptoms, and then symptom management based on removing certain things from your diet and figuring out exactly what those things are that you have removed from your diet and what is actually making a difference. So for example, let's take the lactose intolerance versus A1 sensitivity. If you are getting symptoms when you are drinking regular milk, conventional milk, cow's milk off the grocery store shelf, but you are not getting any symptoms drinking A2 milk, that would indicate that you probably don't have lactose intolerance, because A2 milk also has lactose, and it would likely be the A1 sensitivity, if that makes sense. So it's really trial and error. I think talking to a healthcare provider, whether it's a doctor or a dietitian that specializes in gut health, it's really great to pinpoint and do maybe a bit of an elimination diet and pinpoint areas in your diet and lifestyle, like we talked about, stress, exercise, things like that, that can be causing your gut symptoms, because it can be a little bit tricky to I don't want to say diagnose, but to figure out what is actually it. But the milk test is good, right? If you feel good drinking A2 milk, it's probably not lactose intolerant.
Awesome. Yeah. And then going back to a question from Judy, how does cooking affect probiotics in food? And so I think this goes back to what I was talking about in terms of really understanding the difference between fermented foods versus probiotics. So fermented foods are foods that are made through a fermentation process. So they may or may not have live bacterial cultures in them. So it could be, for example, beer is a fermented food, as well as kefir is a fermented food. Probiotics are a specific strain with evidence for therapeutic benefit for a specific reason. And so there's a few food products that have probiotics in them. Most of them are like drinkable yogurts, for example, or like a drink. So you wouldn't really cook them anyways. So you don't need to worry about the effect that cooking has on probiotics.
Mm-hmm. And the next question here, can you comment on sprouted grains versus whole wheat or multigrain? That's a really good question. So there's a couple, potential benefits of the sprouted grains. So the main thing is that it can make the nutrients more bioavailable, so just a little bit easier to digest. Some report that because these sprouted grains have a little bit less starch, they are easier to digest than regular grains. So you can buy a lot of sprouted grain products, specifically in terms of bread. I think like Silver Hills is one that comes to mind, for example, as being a sprouted grain bread. But it's really, when it comes down to that, I think the amount of sprouted grain that you're getting versus, let's say, whole grain or whole wheat, it really comes down to whatever bread you like the best, right? Like if you really like the sprouted grain bread, I think that's awesome. Have the sprouted grain bread. But if you can't stand like the cardboard sprouted grain, some of the cardboard sprouted grain breads out there, I love Silver Hills. That's not what I was talking about. But if you prefer something like multigrain or whole wheat, that's also going to give you really great health benefits. So don't feel like you only need to have the sprouted grains because they are slightly more bioavailable. You're getting so many nutrients from so many different foods in your diet that it really just comes down to which one you like more.
There's another question about breads here from Joanne. What types of gluten-free breads do you suggest for breakfast to provide fiber? And that's a really great question, because if you are following a gluten-free diet, a lot of gluten-free breads can be very low in fiber. So luckily though, places like Choices do carry really nice gluten-free breads that are higher in fiber. So one brand that comes to mind that's another great Canadian brand is Queen Street Bakery. So they do have higher fiber gluten-free breads. So that could be one option. And I know that Choices carries those breads as well. That could be one option to look at. But the nice thing is that there are a lot of brands coming out now with higher fiber gluten-free breads. So a general rule of thumb, and this would be for not just gluten-free, but all breads, if you're trying to find a higher fiber bread, is to look on the nutrition facts table, and you're going to look at two things. Three things actually. So the first thing that you want to look at is the serving size on the nutrition facts table, because some breads are going to say for one slice, some breads are going to say for two slices. So this is where it can get a little confusing, and you might have to do a little bit of math. And then once you figure out your serving size, then you want to look at the fiber content. And as a general rule of thumb, anything over 4 grams of fiber for one slice of bread is a high fiber bread. So if you can do the math a little bit and work out 4 grams of fiber for one slice of bread, that would be a high fiber bread for both gluten-free and regular breads. And then the third thing to look at is the ingredients list. So kind of what Steph was already talking about in terms of we want the first ingredient for our breads to be something like sprouted whole grain or whole grain. So ingredients lists are listed by weight. So the first three ingredients in the ingredients list are going to be what the most by weight is in that product. So we want our sprouted whole grain or a whole grain flour to be in the first three there, ideally first. And we want to look for whole grain or sprouted whole grain instead of whole wheat for a nice whole grain, high fiber bread.
Mm-hmm. And then the next question here, could you please clarify the vitamin D content again in A2 versus regular milk? Is the vitamin D content in A2 significantly less? Great question. I'm so sorry I wasn't more clear when I was talking about this, but so essentially the two labels were created in different time periods. So, let's say 5 years ago, milk had, and forgive me, these aren't the exact numbers, but they're pretty close, 175 international units per 1 cup of milk. So 175 international units of vitamin D per 1 cup. But the recommended daily allowance back then was only listed at 400 international units. So doing that as a percentage, it's going to work out to be about 45% of your daily limit. We have recognized now over the years that our vitamin D intake should be much higher. And they've updated it to be somewhere around 1,200, 1,250 international units. I forget the exact number that's actually on the daily value. So if you take that same 175 international units, but now you're comparing it against 1,200, it makes it seem like a lot less. So it's closer to 13%, which is what was on the label. So it's the same content, but the daily value has changed because Health Canada has recognized that our vitamin D intake should be quite a bit more. I hope that made sense.
And then the next question is from Christine. Is there A2 yogurt? So currently A2 milk is available only in fluid milk, but you can always contact A2 milk because they love receiving product requests from consumers. So we'll be sure to share this with them as well. And just as a little side note, try making your own yogurt. Like I know that a lot of people, if you have an Instant Pot, there's the yogurt making function. So you could totally use A2 milk to make your own A2 yogurt at home.
Yeah, that would actually be super fun. And if you do it, tag us in your photos on Instagram.
Yeah.
We want to see it.
Yeah. So maybe we'll wait. I think those are all the questions we've received so far. So definitely send us some questions. We love to hear from you guys and we want to make this as helpful as possible. In the meantime, I'm just going to kind of do a little plug for us. So up on the screen here, we have both our website and our email. So if you want to talk to us after, or if you have any kind of lingering questions, maybe you wake up tomorrow morning and you go, oh, shoot, I wish I'd asked about that. Feel free to shoot us an email, or if you want to book an appointment with us, if you want to talk more about things like probiotics, for example, and if you should be taking them and what kind, then you can also book an appointment with us at our website. Awesome. And then another good point actually is back about the A2 yogurt. The A2 milk website has some really good recipes as well. So if you want to try making your own, they probably have one on there.
Mm-hmm. We've had a couple more questions come in. And so one of them is, what is the best way to build back good gut bacteria after a course of antibiotics? Really, really great question, because as we had mentioned earlier, antibiotics are really, really good at killing bad bacteria, but also very, very good at killing good bacteria as well. So really following all of the stuff that Alex and I were talking about today. So, diet-wise, making sure that your diet is full of prebiotics and fiber, fermented foods. You can talk to your healthcare professional about which probiotic supplement, if you're interested in taking an over-the-counter one, would be best for you. And then also in terms of all the lifestyle things that we were talking about. So reducing your stress levels if possible, a healthy amount of physical activity, no excess alcohol or smoking, the variety and consistency in your diet and lifestyle. So those are all really great ways, but I think an emphasis on the prebiotics to help feed what good bacteria you have left, And then you can also look at things like fermented foods and perhaps probiotic supplements, talking with your healthcare provider to figure out how to replenish those good gut bacteria as well.
Mm-hmm. And if you are someone that's on multiple courses of antibiotics or long-term courses of antibiotics, or you find yourself on them quite often, there are probiotics that you can take prophylactically, meaning ahead of time, to help keep your gut bacteria in good amounts and help prevent some of the unwanted side effects like antibiotic-associated diarrhea as well. So that could be something to talk with your medical provider or with your dietitian. Hey, I know that I'm going to be going on these antibiotics and I want to know about how to keep my gut bacteria in good shape, and what supplements might work for that. And so we've had another comment from Jasleen. Where will the recording be available? Thank you. This was an absolutely great session. So thanks, Jasleen, for such good feedback. So the recording of our session is going to be available right where you are. So on the Choices YouTube channel.
And we want to say thank you so much to Choices for providing the groceries, and also A2 Milk for having us as well. Alex already kind of shared where to find us, but I don't know if I forget if she mentioned our Instagram, but at Vancouver Dietitians, and both of us are accepting clients as well. So if you guys have any gut health concerns or anything else, or you just want to chat with us for 15 minutes and see if it would be a good fit, you're more than welcome to shoot us an email or book directly online at our website. Looks like we might be done for questions. If there's any other questions, definitely don't hesitate to shoot us an email. We're happy to hear from you guys.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Alex and Stephanie, for your presentation and that delicious recipe. I'm going to have to make that soon. And just a reminder to everyone that you will receive a survey link at the end of the seminar just to fill out. So you can just enter your mailing address and receive those nutrition bucks. And be sure to visit your local Choices store to speak with either a nutritionist at that location or myself at the Kitsilano location, or you can throw an email to nutrition@choicesmarkets.com. So thank you again. And just like Alex and Stephanie said, feel free to shoot them an email as well. All right. Thank you.